Okay, this is going to be a really fun one. I did it as a card size, but you can do this a larger size as well. We've got two patterns, two different sizes. If you would like to do a bigger one, you can just print out the bigger pattern. I am going to do the smaller one here with you today, the card version. We're going to be using two reds, our alizarin crimson, mixed with some cadmium red. It just makes a really pretty Christmas red. And then we'll be using our sap green, a little bit of our cadmium yellow, which I'm realizing mine is kind of dirty. Let me wash that out. There we go, some cadmium yellow. And for our background blue, we'll be using some of our intense blue. And that is all of the colors we're using. I'm also going to be using a black Sharpie to outline. And you can choose to outline or not. That's up to you. But this is my favorite. It's the Sharpie No Bleed pen. That's what we'll be using. Okay, shall we get started? I'm just going to tuck this under here so that you have a better view of what I'm doing. And I'm going to be using just a medium-sized brush. This is a number 6. You can go larger or smaller. The nice thing about a round brush is you can still use the very tip of the brush for the smaller areas and then the belly of the brush for the larger areas. And so that's what I'll be using today. Okay, why don't we start with red? I've already mixed up a little bit of this Christmas red, which is a mixture of my cadmium red with my alizarin crimson. I'm going to make a little bit more here so that we've got it ready. You can kind of decide how bright you want it to be or how dark you'd like it to be. The alizarin crimson is kind of like a wine red. So I like to add just a tiny bit of that orangey red to just make those colors pop. Okay, I'm going to start with the top area here just so I'm not going into this area trying to not touch that area. I'm going to start at the top and come down. So for my little red ribbon, I'm just going to use the tip of my brush and coming right down. I'm going to do this little bow. Oh, I just love this red. So beautiful. Okay, and then do the outside of this ornament. Just using the tip of my brush in those skinny areas and then pushing down using the belly of my brush in the wider areas where I have a little more room. There. Just trying to stay within those lines. If you get out of a line, don't worry about it. It's watercolor, so it can be loose. And this whole thing is going to be red. I'll show you a trick on how to get a highlight on your ornaments. Let's fill this in first. Okay, I'm going to wash my brush out, and with a dry, clean brush, I'm just going to lift some of that paint off, which will give me a nice highlight. on my ornament. Okay, next let's go to our yellow for our little bell. I'm just going to fill this in. Just pushing down to get most of it filled in, and then on the edges, just using the very tip of my brush. Of course, you can make your bell whatever color you'd like. You could do a silver bell, you could do a red bell, a green bell. Okay, and then I'm just going to do the tops of these ornaments. And then I'm going to do this gold as well. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same trick with my bell that I did with my circle ornament. Just going to lift some of that paint off to give it a nice highlight. Just kind of curve it a little bit so it looks realistic. Okay, now let's come in with our green, our sap green. I'm going to go in here, just using the very tip again, because this is a very small area. Of course, you can always size down on your brush if you're feeling uncomfortable. You can always go to a smaller brush. Right, and then I'm going to make this green. And this. Be green. Go a little bit darker here. All right, and while we let those dry, let's go ahead and do our Merry and Bright. Just gonna get a lot of red, just fill up my brush with that paint. I'm gonna turn this just a little bit. And I'm just, with my tip, I'm gonna get into those smaller areas. And just try my best to stay in those lines. I could just drink this red. It's so beautiful. Merry and Remember, if you get out of the lines a little bit, not to worry about it. It just adds to the feel of our watercolor. I'm definitely not being perfect at staying in the lines here. And if you need to erase, just remember the techniques that we learn in the technique section of Watercolor School, where I show you how to do that. Basically just get your brush clean and dry and just soak that color up, and then come back with a clean, wet brush. And you can usually erase it. But for more detailed, where I really show you how to do it, just go to that technique section if you need to. But really, if you just do your best to follow the lines, it should look great. Okay, I'm just going to add some red up here. And this one's going to be different than the example. I want to put some red right there in the middle. Now you can call this done if you don't want to outline it. I personally am going to outline mine. And I'm just going for the area that is the most dry. So I know I started here. I'm just going to go ahead with my Sharpie and just get some of those little details in. That's what I love about coming back with the Sharpie, is you can add all kinds of fun details. And some of my students like to do the Sharpie first, like to have the Sharpie outlined already, which is totally something you can do as well. I personally like to come in afterwards just because I can add details that I wouldn't think to add before I put the color in. Okay, and I think now that that's all outlined, I'm going to call this one done. I hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you in the next one. Bye.